Imagine spending every Christmas of your life with someone you deeply love, decorating the tree, listening to old stories, and feeling like you're part of something special. That was my experience with my grandfather, Arthur. I was always there for him, helping around the house, listening to his stories, and making sure he never felt alone. Meanwhile, my cousin Eric rarely showed up, never called, and never got involved. Yet he was the one who received Arthur's greatest gift: the beach house, the place where we built our most precious memories. That Christmas, while everyone was celebrating, I felt my world falling apart. Today, I'm going to tell you how that day changed my life forever and led me to make the hardest decision I've ever faced. And you? Have you ever felt betrayed by someone who should have valued you above all else? Share your story in the comments, like this video, and subscribe to the channel, because what comes next will touch your heart deeply. Now let me take you back to the beginning, to the last Christmas when I believed my family was truly united. When I think about my childhood, the most special moments were always Christmases at my grandfather Arthur's beach house. He made sure to turn the occasion into something magical. The house, surrounded by pine trees and with a perfect view of the sea, was decorated with twinkling lights and a giant Christmas tree that we decorated together. I remember Arthur carrying boxes of ornaments from the attic while I helped hang the Christmas balls, some so old they seemed to have stories of their own. "Lily, you know that star on top of the tree has been here since your father was a boy," he'd say with a sparkle in his eyes. I listened intently as he recounted the same stories every year, but for me they never grew old. Meanwhile, my cousin Eric, well, he never really showed up. I think he went to the beach house maybe twice in all those years just to grab presents and disappear. I never understood why he was so absent. Maybe it was because his mother, Aunt Clara, kept saying Eric was too busy or didn't like traveling in the cold. But deep down I knew he simply didn't care. The years went by, and while other grandchildren drifted away, I stayed. When Arthur started having back pain, I was the one who helped organize the house. When the outdoor lights burned out, I was the one who climbed the ladder to replace them. In the kitchen, I was his faithful assistant in making gingerbread cookies, even though he always let the dough burn a little. I thought all this created a unique bond between us. And until that particular Christmas, I truly believed it. That year, everything started as usual. I arrived early, bringing an apple pie he loved. The house was decorated, the fireplace was lit, and Arthur seemed more excited than in previous years. I sat beside him on the sofa as he told me about the challenges he'd faced preparing everything alone. "These old bones aren't the same anymore, Lily," he joked, laughing as I promised that next time I'd bring someone to help. The rest of the family arrived later, including Eric, who walked in as if he were a stranger. He barely looked at Arthur, dropped a present under the tree, and flopped onto the sofa, fiddling with his phone. His girlfriend, Carly, a woman who seemed straight out of a reality show, was with him, rolling her eyes whenever someone tried to include her in the conversation. Then came lunch. The table was laden with food: turkey, salads, desserts. Arthur was beaming, as if on the verge of revealing something important. And he was. As soon as the plates were served, he cleared his throat, demanding everyone's attention. "I have something very special to share with you all," he began, looking at each of the presents. My heart quickened. I imagined he might give an emotional speech about family, or even announce he was selling the house to simplify his life. But what followed left me speechless. "I've decided that when I'm gone, the beach house will go to Eric." Silence filled the room. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the atmosphere. My vision blurred, and for a moment I thought I'd misheard. Eric. The Eric who never cared about Arthur, who didn't even know where the house's tablecloths were. I looked at him, expecting some reaction of surprise, perhaps even embarrassment, but all I saw was a smug smile and a nod, as if he already knew. "Thank you, Grandpa. I'll take good care of it," Eric said, in such a detached way that it sounded like he was talking about any ordinary object. Carly giggled as she leaned over to grab another glass of wine. I wanted to say something, to ask why Arthur had made this decision, but the only thing I could do was push the food on my plate, feeling tears threatening to fall. When I looked at Arthur, he seemed oblivious to the tension around him. He continued speaking, explaining that he wanted the house to stay in the family and that Eric, being the oldest, would be the natural heir. I wasn't the oldest grandchild. That was true. But I was the only one who truly cared. The decorations, the care of the house, the magical Christmases. It all seemed to lose its meaning in an instant. When lunch ended, I stood up, saying I needed some fresh air. I walked out onto the porch, where the Christmas lights flickered in time with music that no longer sounded joyful. The smell of the sea, which had always brought me comfort, now seemed empty. In that moment, I knew something had changed forever. After I went out onto the porch, trying to process what I had just heard, I heard footsteps behind me. It was Aunt Linda, Arthur's sister, who had always been like a second mother to me. She didn't say anything at first, just stood beside me, looking out at the horizon where the sun reflected on the sea. "Are you okay, Lily?" she asked, with that gentle tone she always used when she knew I was struggling to hold back tears. "I don't know how to answer that," I said, my voice weaker than I expected. "He chose Eric, Aunt Linda." "Eric?" As if all these years of dedication meant nothing. She sighed, and I realized she was also upset. "Arthur has his reasons, Lily. But that doesn't mean he's right." Before I could ask what she knew, we heard Eric's voice coming from the living room, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Finally, huh? This house should have been mine a long time ago. It's the best thing my grandfather could do." My blood boiled. I went back inside and found him laughing with Carly, who was sipping another glass of wine as if it were a celebration. I couldn't help myself. "Best thing? You don't even care about this house, Eric. You barely show up here. How do you think you deserve this?" The room fell silent. Everyone stopped eating or talking and turned their heads towards me. Eric just looked at me with that same smug smile. "Oh, Lily, you take everything so seriously. It's just a house. Relax. You already have your city life, your job. Why would you care so much?" "Because this house has meaning," I replied, my voice rising involuntarily. "You don't even know the value of this. The memories that are here. You were never part of this, Eric." "Lily, enough." Arthur's voice cut through the air like a knife. He rarely raised his voice, but in that moment, he seemed more severe than I had ever seen him. "I don't want arguments this Christmas." My face burned with shame and anger. I wanted to reply, but Arthur's firm gaze made me swallow my words. That lunch, which should have been a celebration, became unbearable. Eric continued acting as if nothing had happened. Carly chattered animatedly with Mom about her ideas to renovate the house, and Arthur seemed distant, as if he had already decided the matter was closed. After lunch, Arthur went to his room for his usual nap. I took the opportunity to try to talk to him. I knocked lightly on the door before entering. He was sitting in the armchair near the window, looking out at the sea. "Grandpa, I need to understand why." My voice faltered at the end, and I realized my hands were trembling. "Why, Eric? I've always been here. I've always taken care of you, of the house, of everything." Arthur sighed deeply, as if he had been expecting this conversation. He looked at me, but instead of the affection I'd always seen in his eyes, there was something else. Guilt? Or maybe he simply didn't want to deal with the confrontation. "Lily, you have your life. You're independent, strong. You don't need this house." He paused before continuing. "Eric, he needs it. He's always had more difficulties. He's always been different." "Different?" I interrupted. "He never cared about you, never helped, never came here except to get something. And still, you think he deserves more than me. Lily, please. Don't make this harder than it already is." He looked away, and I knew the conversation was over. I left the room feeling as if a giant weight was crushing my chest. I returned to the living room and found Aunt Linda, who seemed to want to say something but hesitated. Before she could speak, Eric appeared behind me. "You should thank Grandpa for everything he's done for you instead of complaining," he said with a dismissive tone. I didn't reply. I didn't trust my voice to say anything other than exploding in shouts. I just grabbed my coat and went to the door. "Lily, are you leaving?" Aunt Linda asked, concerned. "Yes, I am. I think I've had enough Christmas for today." I left without looking back, feeling the Christmas lights flashing behind me, but none of them seemed to shine. The drive home was silent, and when I arrived, I sat on my living room sofa, staring at the walls. The house seemed cold and empty, an exact reflection of what I felt inside. In that moment, I decided I wouldn't return, neither to the beach house nor to Arthur's house, perhaps never again to my family. The days following that Christmas were a mix of anger and discouragement for me. Every time I thought about the scene, Eric and Carly celebrating as if they had already conquered everything, and Arthur justifying his choice with that excuse of he needs it more. It was like reliving the disappointment. I tried to keep myself busy with work and my city life, but the memories of that house always came back. I found myself thinking about the nights on the porch, listening to the waves crashing while Arthur told stories about how he built that place with his own hands. It was as if somehow Arthur's announcement had erased all those memories, leaving only an emptiness in their place. A few weeks later, Aunt Linda called me. "Lily, I know you're hurt, but Arthur misses you. He doesn't want you to drift away." "He misses me?" I laughed without humor. "Linda, he erased me from his life that Christmas. I've been by his side for years, and he chose to give the house to Eric, as if I hadn't done anything. How can I keep pretending everything is okay?" Aunt Linda sighed on the other end of the line. "Arthur isn't perfect, Lily. And honestly, I don't think he realizes how much this decision hurt you. But he feels it somehow. He just doesn't know how to admit it." This conversation left me uneasy, but not enough for me to return to the beach house. Still, the following year, I accepted Aunt Linda's invitation to Christmas lunch at her house, away from the family chaos. It was a relief, until Linda casually mentioned that Eric had started renovating the house. "Renovating?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Oh yes. He and Carly want to turn it into a kind of event space. Parties, weddings. Something like that. They think they can make money renting the place." My stomach churned. The house, which had been the center of our family memories, would now be just a business. A place where strangers would gather, without understanding the sentimental value of every corner of that property. And Arthur? What does he think of this? He doesn't say much, but I see in his eyes, he doesn't seem happy. Linda hesitated before continuing. "He never says it openly, but I think he's regretful. Of everything." Regretful? That word echoed in my mind for days. But regret doesn't erase decisions. And it didn't change anything for me. Months later, I decided to visit the house one last time, as a final goodbye. I knew Eric and Carly would probably be busy with renovations, so I went on a weekday, when I imagined the house would be empty. When I arrived, my heart sank. The facade was unrecognizable. The traditional white paint had been replaced by a modern gray, and the windows were covered by blackout curtains. Where there had once been life and warmth, there was now coldness. Stepping inside, it felt like invading a strange place. The living room where Arthur and I used to put up the Christmas tree was filled with sound equipment boxes and disassembled tables. The smell of wood and salt that had always welcomed me had been replaced by fresh paint. I walked through the space like a ghost, passing through each room trying to say goodbye. When I reached the porch where we used to spend Christmas nights watching the sea, I stopped. I closed my eyes and forced myself to remember. The laughter, the stories, the twinkling lights. That's it, I told myself. This is where it ends. Before leaving, I saw something that made me hesitate. On a forgotten shelf in the master bedroom was the golden star that Arthur always placed on top of the tree. I carefully picked it up as if it were made of glass, and held it for a long time before putting it in my bag. Back in the car, I looked at the house one last time. In that moment, I promised myself I wouldn't let this story consume me. I still had my life, my dreams, and I could build something that was truly mine. Something that no one could take away. The following Christmas, I decided to do something different. I bought a small Christmas tree for my apartment and placed Arthur's star on top. It was simple, but it was mine. For the first time, I felt I was creating my own traditions, away from the shadows of choices I couldn't control. And as the tree lights twinkled softly, I realized I no longer needed Arthur's approval, Eric's, or anyone else's. Months after my final goodbye, the beach house became just a distant memory. Whenever someone in the family mentioned Eric and Carly, I pretended to be uninterested. But deep down, it was still hard to accept that the place that meant so much to me had become the playground of people who didn't value anything. It was Aunt Linda who brought the news I already feared. In a casual call, she mentioned that Eric and Carly had stopped investing in the renovations. "I think they realized that running an event space isn't as simple as it seemed," she said, with a tone that oscillated between indignation and irony. "And Arthur? Does he still go to the beach house? No. Since Eric took over, he's only been there once or twice. I think he feels out of place. It's not the same place anymore. The idea of Arthur, so connected to that house, distancing himself from it, was strange to me. But deep down it was predictable. Eric never understood the value of that space, and for him the house had always been just another possession. Something he could use as long as it was convenient. Things got worse when stories started circulating about how Eric and Carly were using the house for loud parties. Neighbors complained about the noise, and there were even reports of property damage. A friend of Linda's who lived nearby commented, "That house used to be so welcoming. Now it feels like any club. It doesn't even seem like it's the same family." Each piece of news was like a blow, not just because of what the house had become, but because it felt like everything I had done for Arthur, all those years of dedication, had been completely erased. Then came the moment that made me realize Arthur's choices had bigger consequences than he imagined. Linda called me again, this time with a heavy voice. "Lily, I need to tell you something about Arthur. He's not doing well." "Not doing well? What happened?" "He's in the hospital. His health is very fragile and he's alone. Eric and Carly didn't visit him." That last sentence was like a punch to the stomach. How could they not? He gave everything to them. The house, the family name, everything that mattered. And now when he needs them, they abandon him. Linda sighed. "It's complicated, Lily. Eric has always been selfish, you know that. Arthur must be realizing the mistake he made, but it's too late." As hurt as I was, something inside me still felt the need to see Arthur. Maybe it was a need to close that cycle once and for all. So, the following week I went to the hospital. When I entered the room, I barely recognized the man there. Arthur looked smaller, more fragile, as if the weight of all his decisions had finally fallen upon him. He opened his eyes and saw me, but for a moment he didn't say anything. "Lily." He finally spoke, his voice low and raspy. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Surprised?" I asked, trying to hide the hurt I still felt. "I thought Eric would be here, taking care of everything." He looked away. "Eric? He didn't come. Carly said they were busy with other things. I guess they don't think it's necessary to visit me." I laughed humorlessly. "Of course not. It wouldn't be convenient for them." Arthur took a deep breath, and for a moment, I thought he might try to defend himself. But instead he simply murmured, "I made a mistake, Lily. Not only with the house, but with you." Those words took me by surprise. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to yell, to ask why he hadn't seen this before. But another part knew that his regret, though late, was genuine. "Lily, I'm so sorry. I thought I was doing the best for the family. But in the end, I think I only pushed away the people who truly mattered." We fell silent for a while, the sound of the heart monitor filling the room. After a few minutes I stood up. "Rest, Arthur. I'll talk to the nurse to see what you need." As I left the hospital, I didn't feel the anger I had felt before. After my visit to the hospital to see Arthur, something shifted within me. It wasn't an immediate relief or a magical moment of forgiveness, but a slow realization that carrying the resentment any longer wouldn't be worth it. I had spent so much time trying to please others, trying to be noticed, that I had forgotten what truly mattered: taking care of myself. The following Christmas would be different. I decided I wouldn't spend those holidays trying to fulfill family expectations, or living with the tension of being in a place where I wasn't valued. For the first time, I did something for myself. I bought a small, charming Christmas tree for my apartment. It came with white lights and simple ornaments, but that was enough. In fact, it was more than enough. Placing the golden star I had picked up at the beach house on top of the tree, I felt a wave of emotions. Sadness for the memories left behind, but also a strange sense of accomplishment. The star somehow represented my journey, everything I had lived through and overcome. On Christmas Eve, I prepared a simple but delicious meal. I made lasagna, something Richard loved and brought back good memories of him. I poured a glass of wine, put on my favorite Christmas music, and simply allowed myself to exist in that moment. For the first time in years, there was no drama, no arguments, no feeling that I was invisible to those around me. I received messages from some friends and even Aunt Linda, who wrote, "Arthur asked about you. He misses you very much. It took me a while to reply. Thank you for letting me know, Linda. But this Christmas I need to take care of myself. I hope he understands. As much as part of me felt like going to him again, another part knew it was time to set boundaries. It wasn't about revenge or disdain, but about protecting my heart. I knew Arthur had regretted his actions, but that didn't change the fact that I had to fight for myself for a long time. In the following months, I focused on something I had always wanted: saving up to buy my own home. The money that had previously gone to trips, gifts, and small help I gave to the family was now directed towards my future. I worked hard, saved every possible penny, and at the end of that year I found the perfect place. It was a small house with a porch overlooking a garden. Nothing extravagant, but it was mine. When I first walked in, I felt a mixture of pride and freedom I had never experienced before. The following Christmas, I made sure to celebrate in a way that represented this new phase. I invited some close friends, people who truly valued my presence, and prepared a special dinner. We decorated the house together, and Arthur's golden star, now with a completely different meaning, shone atop the tree. As the lights twinkled gently, I realized something important. I no longer needed anyone's validation. The beach house, Arthur, Eric, Carly. It was all in the past. I had learned to set myself free and move forward. And you? If you had to choose between holding on to resentment or seeking the freedom to start over, what would you do? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to the Moving Narratives channel for more stories that inspire us to reflect, grow, and most of all, move forward.
Hi, you are on the Moving Narratives channel. Subscribe and follow our stories.